Greetings, everyone. I'm Steve Kramer with the Charter for Compassion, and welcome to our delightful Rectangles of Love. Today is day 13 of our 14-day series of sessions for World Interfaith Harmony Week. Our theme this year is Living Wisdom, Meditations and Practices for a Compassionate Life. Our intention is to be of authentic service to all of life, love in full expression, LIFE. We believe that through the unity of all faith traditions, we can achieve peace, harmony, and compassion. Today, our presenter is Greg Patenaude, and I hope I meant to ask you how to pronounce your last name, Greg.
Perfect.
Well, okay, very good. Um, and Greg will be leading us through compassion in the age of conflict. He will share wisdom and a meditative practice from the Buddhist tradition. Compassion for ourselves as well as others is a key factor for negotiating through these challenging times. Greg is a Buddhist teacher, writer, and director of Yangye Drolung Ling, a Tibetan Buddhist nonprofit. Greg enjoys translating the wisdom of ancient practice traditions into simple, practical tools and skills people can use in their everyday life. Before I turn the stage over to Greg, however, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and honor the interconnectedness of all beings, including the cosmos, Earth, indigenous peoples, our ancestors, and all of creation. We are grateful to all who came before us as caretakers of our planet. We recognize, as children of the earth, our responsibility to care for the land, gifts, and relationships that sustain us. We commit to approaching every interaction with reverence, reciprocity, harmony, and compassion. In healing ourselves, we heal the world. And I turn it over to you, Greg.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the introduction. The Interfaith Community Sanctuary in Seattle is it's a beautiful little community. They have this old historic church in Ballard in Seattle, and it's just a wonderful space for all these different religious traditions to come together and to celebrate things like compassion, things like kindness, things like wisdom. And it's a treasure here. So if you happen to be in Seattle, I encourage you to stop by ICS, as they call it. It's a nice little community. So thank you, Steve, for inviting me here today. It's great to meet all of you. I'm really excited to share kind of a Buddhist perspective on this idea of compassion. When Steve invited me, it was in January, so it was kind of right around like the change in political situations here in the U.S. And the first thing that kind of came to my mind was this idea of compassion being a tool for navigating our current times, right? And when you think about a tool, the first thing I think about is it the right tool, right? Like if I'm trying to fix something, I want to make sure I have the right tool, the right method, right? And so I was, given our kind of current times, I was thinking, is compassion the right tool for the job? Is compassion the thing that we need to cultivate in order to fix the problems that we're seeing in the world today? And obviously there's, putting politics aside, there's a lot of problems in the world today, right? There's a lot of economic, disruption, a lot of, not, I mean, there's people all over the world here, in Europe, in the US, but we're seeing more and more homelessness, more and more, drug abuse in the US. We're seeing, environmental disruption. That the recent fires in LA are a great example. But we see this environmental disruption all over now, right? And I think people feel overwhelmed with the amount of conflict and the amount of adversity. And we have these big hearts, and we have a lot of ideas about what we would like to see in the world, the way that we would like things to be. But there's not always a clear path from where we are currently to where we would like to go, right? And so I would like to kind of paint a picture today for how compassion is a useful tool for kind of finding our place, finding our current place, and getting kind of situated in our world as it is, but also as a way to, chart a path forward, right? To move the conversation forward, to address some of the problems that the world is currently seeing. So that's kind of my goal today. I don't know, might be we'll see how it goes. So first I want to start with the logic of compassion. You might not think that compassion and logic are synonymous. In the Buddhist tradition, compassion is based on wisdom. And so it's, oftentimes when we think of compassion, we think of like the emotion of compassion, right? But here, compassion is based on wisdom. And in the Buddha taught that wisdom comes from understanding, right? Understanding how everything's interconnected, how, the health of an organism, whether that's a person or whether that's a society or an organization, the health of an organism depends on all the different parts and pieces, right? And so if there's, disruption or imbalance or, unhealthy states within that organism, it's going to affect the health of the organism as a whole, right? And so this idea of wisdom being understanding how everything is interconnected, how everything is, relies on each other, right? And so when we have that wisdom, then we can see that, well, actually, relationships really matter, right? Because we're all in relationships with each other, even if it's not necessarily directly apparent, right? There might not be direct relationships. They might not be, we might not be communicating directly to each other, but still we have this relational connection, through our work, through, the things that we choose to, buy, through the things that we choose to do with our life, right? So we're all impacting in our own way, in a small way, but it's in our own way. We're all impacting the world, the community around us, the people around us, right? Our family, our friends. The way that we interact with them has an effect in the world. And so this idea of compassion is we're recognizing that, right? We have the wisdom to see that, yes, that is the way things are, that we're all interconnected, that my actions do matter, even though they're small ripples, those waves do extend out. And so when we have that wisdom, then compassion becomes a logical thing, right? Because we understand that the way that we act, the way that we speak, everything that we do has an impact, right? And so the logic of compassion is that from understanding the way things are, right? From understanding our own position, but also the situation of others, from that understanding leads to acceptance. Once we understand something, then we can accept it, right? If it's really hard to accept something if we don't understand it, right? Because we kind of hold to our own view, we hold to our own biases, our own kind of like what we think is the right way to do things. But if we're never reaching beyond ourselves to understand another situation, their view, their position, then we're never going to accept that position, right? Because we've never established understanding as a basis for acceptance. But from understanding grows acceptance. And then from acceptance, we can actually have a place where we can communicate, right? Because we're seeing the other person. We're seeing their needs, their wants, their problems, right? And so then with acceptance, we can reach out with kindness and respect and compassion, right? Because we understand the other person on the other side of the conversation. And so this logic of compassion is that in a world where we're so divided, where there's so much, you know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I had family members who didn't want to come home for the holidays because they didn't want to be in the same room as someone else, right? And I'm sure you all have heard similar situations where people have stopped talking to each other, stopped being willing to be present for each other. And if we can't be present for one another, if we can't even show up in the same room and treat each other with respect and dignity, then how are we ever going to resolve any conflict, right? How are we ever going to fix anything? How are we going to figure out a solution to all of our problems if we can't even talk to each other, right? And so this idea of compassion as not only an important tool, but maybe like the most important tool for our times to chart a way forward, right? Because it gives us a beginning. It gives us a place to start. And it gives us a place of mutual respect and mutual, you know, welcoming and openness and receptivity, right? It's no longer just pushing our own agenda or pushing our own ideas about what we think is the best way or the right way. It's taking everyone into the conversation and saying, okay, I understand that this situation is complex and maybe I don't understand all like the facets of the situation. And so by welcoming everyone in and acknowledging the complexity of the situation and seeing, you know, maybe the divergent perspectives, divergent views, we can actually start to be present for each other and communicate with each other and, you know, figure out what we're going to do, which is not an easy picture, right? Compassion is the basis and it's also the path, but we can't necessarily see the result, right? The result is like over the horizon. It's like, and I mean, if you imagine like a mountain pass, right? Like there's a mountain pass, and it seems like we can't cross over, right? It seems like from where we are to where we want to go on the other side of this pass, it seems unlikely or impossible or just not clear to us, right? But if we chart the path and we use compassion as the basis, then we get over that pass and then we can, you know, we have to put in a lot of work between here and there. You know, it's going to take a lot of effort. It takes time. It's not like something we can just zip zip to the end. It takes time. It takes effort. But if we stick to the course, stick to the path, then eventually we cross over that pass and we can see, oh, now I can actually start to see more clearly. Like, you know, I can start to see the end that we're trying to reach. So that's kind of how I view compassion on the path, right? And why it's important. why the work that you're all doing here, trying to celebrate diversity, trying to celebrate community and connection, and bringing people together around these I don't even really want to say ideals, because they're not ideals. It's like part of the human experience, right? And it's something that we desperately need to integrate into our human experience in order to, live a good life. Um, so yeah, the work that you're all doing to do that is really priceless, right? And it might seem like, you know, it's not making a difference, or it might seem like it's too slow, or uh, that it's not the right tool. Maybe we need to, like, amass more wealth. We need to amass more power. Like, right? We think power and wealth are like always the go-to tools. Um, but we know that we know where that road goes, right? That road goes to more division, more imbalance, uh, and it doesn't actually resolve the conflict, right? It just changes it. So compassion is a way to fundamentally change our approach to solving those problems. Um, and from a Buddhist, just to kind of bring that into our kind of, so that's like the view, that's the kind of vision, I guess you could say. How do we bring that into practice, right? Where do we start? And I think as a Buddhist, the teachings of the Buddha say that where we need to start is we need to start with us. We need to change our mind. We need to change our hearts. We need to cultivate compassion in our minds, right? And so all of that starts with learning how to be present for ourselves. When we can be present for ourselves, when we can be present in the midst of our emotions, in the midst of our suffering, when we can deal with our own anxiety effectively, then we can start to extend that to others, right? We can be there for others who are undergoing suffering. We can be there for others who are, going through difficult times or challenging times. And all of that means just that we can show up in a way that's open and responsive and attending to the situation, rather than kind of coming in and just dominating the situation, right? It's like, you know, it's sometimes there's kind of misguided compassion where we think, well, I'm just going to come in and fix everything, right? Like, I'm going to come in and you know, I'm going to do everything. Just don't worry. Just sit back. I'm going to take care of it, right? Um, but that's not actually necessarily helpful, right? Like, sure, you're kind of like, tidying things up or fixing things, or, you have a it's like I mean, I'm sure many of you are parents. I'm a parent. You can you can go in your child's room and clean up the room and put away all their clothes, and put away their books and put away the toys, and get everything clean again, right? And it's like, okay, now it's fixed. I fixed it for you. Or you can teach your child how. The hard thing is to teach your child how to do their laundry, how to do it, how to put away their clothes, how to put away their books, right? That's the hard thing, but that's really what the child is going to benefit from, because then they can clean their own room, right? If we're constantly just coming in as the fixer, the compassionate fixer, uh, we're not actually, you know, long-term helping things. We need to kind of come in and like meet people where they are. Oh, why are the clothes on the floor? Is it because you don't know how to fold your clothes? Well, let me show you how to fold your clothes. And so we can teach, and we can work with people uh, to come up with a way to like address the problems, right? Um, so from the Buddhist perspective, all that starts with presence, how we show up in the world, right? Are we showing up with openness, with mindfulness, with uh, I don't want to necessarily use compassion in this sense. I like a lot of times in the Buddhist teachings we talk about responsiveness, right? It's like this. you're responsive. It's kind of like if you're dancing with someone, one way to dance is just to like take control and just like you're the leader and they have to follow you, right? Like they're just the I don't know, there's a word for this in dancing, but like, it's they're just following your lead, right? But another way to dance is where you're actually both responsive to each other and it's dynamic and it's changing and there's a level of attention and receptivity that's required in order for the dance to be successful, right? If one person is just going out there and just, you know, stomping around, dominating the dance floor, like the other person is going to either feel left out, or maybe they're going to get their toes stepped on, or maybe they're just going to feel like this person's not a very good dancer, right? Um, and so it's the same thing with compassion. Compassion should look like responsiveness. It should look like receptivity. It shouldn't look like me coming in and saying, this is the way things should be. Um, so yeah, the idea of cultivating presence as the starting point, once we can do that for ourselves, once we can learn how to uh, sit, for 10, 20 minutes in an empty room and not feel like we're being overwhelmed by our own thoughts or our own emotions or our own boredom. Once we can develop that presence and that uh, openness to whatever is happening around us, then that's something we can carry forward. We can carry that into our relationships with our family, our friends. We can carry that into our workplace. We can carry that into our communities, right? As you're walking down the street, you can carry that with you wherever you go. You can carry that presence, that receptivity, that responsiveness. And then that becomes a way that we can start to navigate some of the problems that we have, right? That becomes a way that we can be present in the midst of difficult conversations or in the midst of difficult people who we might not necessarily agree with or who might even be disrespectful to us, right? They kind of like put us down. It's kind of, people do this all the time. It's like a power thing. They just like to, you know, make everyone around them feel bad to kind of put themselves on a pedestal. But we can be present with that because we recognize our own innate dignity. We recognize our own ground of being, and we have a place to stand in that ground, right? We don't need someone else to like say, oh, this is where you can stand. This is your place, right? We already know our place. We already have our presence. We know how to occupy the present, right? Some people like Occupy Wall Street was kind of a thing, I don't know, like 10 years ago now. I can't remember, a long time ago. But let's talk about occupy the present, right? Like how do we start that movement? How do we start that as a collective energy that we're trying to embody, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of, I don't know, I think that's kind of maybe a good place to leave us off. I thought for the practice portion of today, we would sit together maybe for 5 minutes and just kind of establish that presence. And then I'll also introduce a kind of what's called like a loving kindness type meditation where we're kind of cultivating some of this sense of compassion and sharing that with others. So before we do that, I don't know, do we want to, Steve, I'm sorry, do you want me to do a little bit of a Q&A now, or should we just hop into the practice?
Um, we can do, what's your preference? We could do a Q&A now if you like, or
Let's actually, let's sit and
save that.
then and then we'll do a Q&A at the end, because that way it's not, sometimes Q&As, I don't know, they can disrupt
The flow or
the
energy.
flow, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just sit for a few minutes. So I'll invite you all to just find a comfortable seat. Doesn't have to be anything, fancy. You can just sit in a chair or on a couch or wherever you are. But just a couple of foundations. If you're sitting in a chair, just kind of try to sit up straight, so your back straight. Just take a moment to kind of get settled, relax your body, relax the breath, relax the mind. Noticing any tension in your shoulders, the neck or the jaw. Just kind of exhaling and just letting go, relaxing, just letting go. If there's anywhere else in the body, maybe the knees or the hips or just anywhere that's kind of tight or like uncomfortable, just kind of wiggling around a little bit, just relaxing, letting go, just getting settled, arriving. You can start to notice the breath, noticing the inhale and the exhale. Just taking a few deeper inhales, and on the exhale, just letting go, letting be. And then bringing your attention to the sensation of the breath at the nostrils, feeling the breath coming in and exiting, exhaling. Just connecting with that sensation at the tip of the nose. Of course, your mind will get distracted by thoughts or feelings or sensations. Just recognize that wandering mind and bring it back to the breath. Bringing that back to a place of presence, place of balance, this mindful awareness. takes a while for the body's energy and the mind to settle. But just like a glass filled with dirty water, if you let it sit 5, 10 minutes later, that sediment starts to settle out just naturally. You're not doing anything. The agitation, the restlessness, the movement of the mind naturally starts to settle out. The mind becomes calm and clear, peaceful. It's the nature of the mind revealing itself. It's not something we're making, it's just naturally present. But from this place of stillness, from this place of presence, we can start to engage in a loving kindness meditation. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we call this practice Tonglen, which means exchanging self and other, or sharing and receiving, or giving and taking. But first, we want to cultivate, and we'll start with someone that we have a strong connection to. This could be maybe a spouse or a parent or a child, friend, just someone in our life who's going through a difficult situation. Just take a moment to connect with that person in our minds, imagining their suffering, imagining their fear, what they're worried about, their pain. Just trying to take a moment to understand their situation, connect with that. And then with that image of this person clearly in your mind and feeling connected to their suffering, feeling connected to their pain, their feelings of being overwhelmed. As you exhale, imagine sharing all of your love and kindness and generosity, or maybe sharing whatever it is that they need. You can share that as this luminous white light. It's like a cool breeze that kind of pacifies all of their suffering. And then as you inhale, you can imagine taking away all that suffering, taking away that weight off their shoulders. You're just kind of relieving them of that suffering, of that burden. making them feel a sense of possibility again, making them feel like they're not overwhelmed, but they have some kind of way forward. So just kind of play with this visualization as you exhale, exhaling this white light, sharing all of your love, kindness, generosity with this person. And then as you inhale, imagine taking away all of that pain and suffering. If your mind wanders, just take a moment to reconnect with that person, reconnect with that situation that they're going through, and then reconnect with the breath, the inhale and the exhale. And to close out the session, we can imagine as we exhale, exhaling that pure white light and feeling the whole universe. You can direct it towards particular people, or you can even particular countries or places of suffering. You can just imagine that light filling the extent of space, filling the universe as far as the mind can imagine. A warm embrace. And then on an inhale, you can imagine that light coming back and being reabsorbed into your own body. Your body becoming a body of light. It's luminous, transparent, like a rainbow in the sky. And then you can imagine that body of light dissolving into your heart center, dissolving into a tiny sphere of light, like a star suspended in the night sky. This brilliant star in the center of your heart. And then you can imagine that luminous sphere of light dissolving into space, just resting in that clear, luminous, spacious awareness. And gradually open the eyes, but carry that sense of presence, that sense of mindful awareness. All right. Well, thank you guys. Hopefully that was, I'm sure many of you have meditated before, so you might be familiar with a lot of those techniques. Um, but yeah, let's open it up for questions or comments or concerns or anything at all. Anything you guys want to share? Maybe your own insights, your own, wisdom. Let's see here.
Okay, I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Steve.